At Easter brunch, I handed my mom a basket my kids had spent all week preparing. She glanced at it and said, "Don't make this a pity show." I just smiled, set it on the table, and walked out. 3 days later, my sister texted, "Why did you lock the account?" "We can't pay," I replied. "Thought you didn't want to show." Later, my mom finally appeared at my door, furious and demanding answers. They'd spent the entire week preparing that basket. I'd hear them at the kitchen table after dinner, carefully painting pastel eggs with the kind of concentrated focus only children possess. Rolling sugar cookie dough, debating which colors looked most like spring, giggling over inside jokes only they understood. They even tucked in a couple of drawings they'd made at school, one of all of us standing under a rainbow, another of a giant smiling bunny with arms stretched wide in welcome. Melissa had been the one to organize it all, even though she knew from experience that my mother wasn't the easiest person to please. But she wanted the kids to feel involved, to have that sense of giving something special to their grandmother. By Easter morning, the basket looked like something from a magazine spread. Perfectly arranged, bursting with love and effort. When we walked into my parents' house, the dining table was set for 10, filled with the smell of baked ham and cinnamon rolls. My dad sat in his corner with his newspaper, not looking up. A few cousins were already there, chatting quietly. Jenna, my sister, sat with her little girl, scrolling on her phone. The kids were excited, practically bouncing as they ran up to my mom with the basket clutched in their hands. Melissa stood beside me, holding her breath. My mom glanced at it, her eyes moving over the painted eggs, homemade cookies, and crayon drawings. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "Don't make this a pity show." Melissa's shoulders stiffened. My kids froze. I felt all the air in the room shift into that thick silence where everyone pretends not to have heard something, but they definitely did. No one moved. My mom turned away, already busying herself with something on the stove, as if she hadn't just crushed her grandchildren's excitement in 2 seconds flat. I took the basket from the kids and set it gently on the table. I smiled, but not out of amusement. It was a tight, deliberate smile, the kind you wear when you're seconds away from saying something you'll regret, but you know you can't. Not in front of your children. The rest of the family stared at their plates, or their phones. Not one person said a thing. Melissa looked at me. I nodded toward the door. We gathered the kids, said nothing to anyone, and left. We didn't even sit down. The drive home was quiet except for questions from the back seat. They wanted to know what pity show meant. Melissa told them it was just something Grandma said that didn't make sense. I didn't explain further, partly because I didn't have the right words, partly because I was still deciding what to do about it. 3 days later, I got a text from Jenna. "Why did you lock the account?" "We can't pay." I'd been helping her for months, sending money every few weeks so she could cover rent and daycare for her daughter. After her divorce, she'd been struggling, and while my parents talked a big game about families sticking together, I was the one actually stepping up to make sure she stayed afloat. What she didn't know was that the account I'd been transferring money to was in my name, and I had just shut it down. I replied, "Thought you didn't want to show." No answer. That evening, there was pounding on my front door. When I opened it, my mom was standing there, her face red, not from the cold, but from pure rage. She didn't wait for an invitation. She started talking rapid fire about how I had no right to abandon my sister, about how Jenna was a single mom, and it was my job to make sure she had what she needed. I let her finish her first tirade, watching her the whole time. Melissa appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel, her expression tight. When my mom finally stopped to take a breath, I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not responsible for supporting Jenna," I said slowly. "I helped her because I chose to, not because I owed her or you anything. When Jenna's ex walked out, it wasn't you making sure she could pay rent or keep the lights on. It was me, month after month, quietly wiring money so she wouldn't lose her home." Melissa stepped into the hallway and stood beside me. She didn't raise her voice. Every word came out steady and deliberate. "It's shameful," Melissa said, "that you could humiliate your own grandchildren in front of an entire table of family over something as harmless and kind as a handmade basket, and then have the nerve to show up days later demanding help from the same people you just belittled." My mom didn't like hearing that. She switched tactics instantly, trading anger for guilt. Family was supposed to take care of each other, she said. Jenna had a young daughter to raise. I was throwing away my responsibility as a brother. She painted the whole thing as if I'd abandoned Jenna out of spite, conveniently ignoring the fact that I'd been the only one actually helping her. "If you and Dad think Jenna's such a priority," I said, "then you can help her yourselves. I've been carrying that weight for a year while you sat back, never once offering to contribute." "Not once." Melissa added that this wasn't even about Jenna's needs, it was about control. My parents had been putting Jenna on a pedestal since we were kids, overlooking every mistake she made while holding me to impossible standards. They still saw me as the one they could lean on for anything, while Jenna remained the golden child who could do no wrong. That hit a nerve. My mom's eyes narrowed and the volume crept back into her voice. She accused Melissa of trying to turn me against the family. She said Melissa had been nothing but trouble since the day we got married, that I wasn't the man I used to be because of her influence. She even went so far as to say the kids shouldn't be around Melissa so much because she was clearly influencing them the wrong way. That was it. Melissa told her she needed to leave. My mom stepped forward instead, like she thought she could intimidate her. She kept talking, calling us selfish, ungrateful, irresponsible. She said she'd never ask for anything again, in that tone that really means the opposite. I walked over to the door and opened it. "You're welcome to visit your grandchildren anytime. You can treat them and my wife with respect," I said. "Until then, there's nothing else to talk about." She stormed past me, muttering about how she didn't raise me to be like this. The door slammed so hard the picture frames in the hallway rattled. For the next few days, it was quiet. No texts, no calls. Then one evening, Melissa's phone started lighting up with messages from cousins and an aunt we barely talked to. All of them had heard some version of the same story, that Melissa was a bad mother, that I'd changed for the worse since marrying her, that I'd turned my back on my sister out of sheer pride. The lies were spreading fast, and I knew exactly where they were coming from. My cousin Megan started with a casual check-in, asking if everything was okay, then slipping in a comment about how she'd heard Melissa was keeping the kids from my mom. My aunt called the next day, saying Mom had been worried sick about me, that she was telling people she didn't even recognize me anymore. By the third day, I understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't accidental gossip. My mom was deliberately crafting a version of events where she was the victim, Jenna was the helpless single mom I had cruelly abandoned, and Melissa was the outsider who had poisoned me against my own blood. Melissa took it personally. Every night that week, she sat at the kitchen table reading and rereading messages from relatives. Some were fishing for details. Others were openly siding with my mom. She kept scrolling until she'd finally set the phone down like it was too heavy to hold. It didn't stop at calls and texts. My mom moved the whole thing online, posting cryptic Facebook statuses like, "It's sad when you lose a child to someone else's influence," and "Families should never turn their back on family no matter what." The comment sections filled with relatives speculating, offering prayers, and dropping passive-aggressive hints that they knew who she was talking about. What bothered me most wasn't just the damage to Melissa's reputation, it was how fast people were willing to believe it. The same people who'd known me for decades were nodding along to a version of events that left out the truth entirely. I realized that if I stayed quiet, my kids would eventually hear the family's version of the story. They'd hear that their mom was cold and controlling, that their dad had abandoned his sister without reason. That was unacceptable. The next Sunday, I called my mom and told her I'd be coming over. She said fine in that flat, tight voice that told me she thought she'd won by getting me to initiate contact. But this wasn't a peace talk. I chose Sunday afternoon for a reason. My parents always had people over after lunch, aunts, uncles, sometimes neighbors. It meant there would be witnesses who could hear the truth for themselves instead of getting it filtered through my mom. Melissa walked in beside me, her chin slightly raised in resolve. We stepped into the living room and found exactly the crowd I'd expected. My mom sitting with Jenna on the couch, my dad in his recliner pretending to watch a game, and two of my aunts sipping coffee. The second we walked in, the room's energy changed. I didn't bother with small talk. "We need to set the record straight." My mom immediately said she didn't see the point if I'd already made up my mind to attack her. "This isn't about attacking anyone," I said. "It's about putting an end to the half-truths and gossip making their way through the family." I laid it all out. Easter brunch. The basket the kids made. Her pity show, comment in front of everyone. Us leaving without eating a single bite. The text from Jenna about the locked account. Her showing up at my door furious that I'd stopped funding my sister's rent and daycare. I explained that I'd done more for Jenna in the past year than anyone else in the room, and I wasn't going to be treated like an ATM while my own family was treated with disrespect. My mom sat stone-faced, but I could see Jenna shifting in her seat. Then something I didn't expect, Jenna spoke up. She said she'd appreciated my help after her divorce and never asked my mom to confront me. She said she didn't even know what pity show was supposed to mean and had been embarrassed when she found out what happened. But she also didn't call out the rumors directly. She left that part hanging, which told me she wasn't ready to push back on Mom fully. Melissa stepped forward then. She didn't raise her voice or go for cheap shots. Our kids are not going to grow up hearing that their mother was manipulative or that their father abandoned his family, she said plainly. If Mom ever wants a relationship with them, it will be based on respect, not control. One of my aunts tried to soften the mood, suggesting we all just agree Easter was a misunderstanding. That's when my mom snapped. She shot up from the couch and started shouting that she could say whatever she wanted in her own home, that I'd overreacted, and that if Melissa and I were so sensitive, maybe we should just stay away altogether. Melissa didn't even blink. If that's what you want, we can arrange it. Then something happened I'd never seen before. My dad actually spoke up. He said maybe my mom had gone too far and that she should at least apologize to the kids. My mom turned on him like he'd betrayed her voice rising so fast both aunts shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The room got thick with tension. My mom grabbed her purse and keys and headed for the door. As she passed me, she said I'd regret choosing sides. Jenna followed her, but not before glancing back at me with a look I couldn't read, part sympathy, part warning. When we got home that night, Melissa walked into the kitchen, poured herself some water, and finally said, "She's not done. She's going to find a way to make this worse." She was right. 2 days after the showdown, Melissa's phone rang while she was sorting laundry. She put it on speaker without thinking. That's the only reason I heard every word. It was the director of the kids' after-school program, a warm, level-headed woman we'd known for years. But her tone was off. She said she'd received concerns about our home life from someone who wished to remain anonymous. According to the caller, Melissa was overly controlling, kept the kids from seeing their grandmother for no valid reason, and our home had become tense and unstable since I'd cut off financial support to a family member. Melissa didn't say much, just thanked her for telling us and hung up. She stared at the phone for a few seconds before looking at me. "Mom," she said. One word. It wasn't a guess. The details were too exact, the Easter comment, the money for Jenna, the implication that Melissa was pulling strings. All the talking points my mom had been using in her rumor campaign had now been fed to someone in a position to make trouble for us. The director mentioned the anonymous caller had said they were a concerned relative, hoping the kids could maintain a connection to their grandmother despite the tension at home. That line alone was as good as a signature. I was done. That night, I called my mom directly. I told her we'd be coming over tomorrow evening and she'd better be there. She laughed in that clipped, condescending way she always did when she thought she was in control. "If you're coming here to attack me again, don't bother," she said. I told her she didn't have a choice. When Melissa and I showed up the next evening, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Just my mom and dad at the kitchen table. No TV on, no dinner smells. My dad looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I know about the call to the program," I said flat out. "If you ever interfere in our parenting again, you'll never see your grandkids, not at birthdays, not at holidays, not even by accident." Melissa told her that going after our parenting wasn't just petty, it was dangerous, and she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. My mom tried to play innocent, leaning on that old line about how people talk and you can't control what gets back to you. But when I asked her directly if she'd made the call, she didn't deny it. She just looked away and said, "I was only trying to help them." My dad shifted in his chair, muttered something about this going too far, then got up and left the room. That told me all I needed to know. "This is it," I said. "From now on, I'm not responsible for Jenna's bills. I'm not your backup plan, and I'm not going to pretend you haven't tried to damage my marriage and reputation. The only reason you haven't been completely cut off is because my kids deserve to decide for themselves one day if they want a relationship with you." She didn't say a word as we left. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Jenna. "I didn't know how bad it was until now. We need to talk." Something about the wording made me pause. Until now implied she'd learned something recently. She'd been watching this unfold in silence, and I wasn't sure if she was reaching out because she wanted peace or because she'd realized things weren't going her way anymore. I agreed to meet her at a quiet roadside diner halfway between us. She was already there when I arrived, hands locked around a coffee mug like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. She didn't smile when she saw me. We didn't bother with small talk. I didn't know how far things had gone until recently. She started. She told me she'd stayed out of the mess because she thought it would burn itself out, Mom blowing off steam, me cooling down, the usual cycle. But Easter had been different. Then she admitted something that made me sit back. For months before Easter, Mom had been pressuring her to get me to send more money. Not asking, pressuring. She told Jenna it was my duty to take care of her because I was better off. When I shut down the account, Mom wasn't furious because Jenna might struggle. She was furious because it meant she'd have to either help financially or admit she wouldn't. Did you know she contacted the kids' program? I asked. Her head snapped up and she shook it instantly. No. But yeah, that sounds like her. She didn't even have to think about it. Then came the part that was hardest for her. Things weren't good. Her job barely covered rent. Daycare was taking more than she could afford. Her ex was still months behind on child support. She wasn't looking for pity, just telling me where things stood. I sat there stirring coffee I wasn't even drinking, thinking about all the years I'd helped her because it was the family thing to do. In reality, it had always been Mom's thing, a way to keep me financially tied to her, to make sure she could claim we take care of our own, without lifting a finger herself. The moment I stopped, she turned it into a weapon. I'll help again, I told Jenna. But only under strict terms. No involvement from Mom or Dad. No passing messages. No letting them know when or how I'm helping. This is between us and only us. The moment Mom tries to claim any part of it, I walk away. Jenna nodded. She didn't argue or look happy about needing help, but I could tell she was relieved it was coming without strings from our parents. Months passed. Jenna and I talked more now, mostly about the kids. She hadn't gone back to being Mom's messenger. My parents still posted their vague, self-pitying updates online about losing a child to outside influences and family betrayal, but it didn't matter anymore. They had no power over me, over Melissa, or over our kids. Helping Jenna felt different now. It was my choice, my terms. For the first time in years, my parents couldn't twist it into their story or use it to pull me back under their control. And I think that, more than the money, was what they really couldn't stand. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. The number wasn't saved in my phone, but the area code was familiar. It was the front office secretary from my niece's school. She told me my niece had been picked up early twice that week by someone who wasn't listed as an authorized contact. My stomach tightened before she even said the name. It was my mom. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked if she'd been given permission by Jenna. The secretary said she didn't know, but my mom had seemed trustworthy and knew all the right details. She told them Jenna was too overwhelmed to make pickup and that she was helping until things at home got better. The second I hung up, I called Jenna. She didn't even let me finish. She what? Jenna had no idea it had happened. No warning, no request, nothing. She'd assumed her daughter had just come home from school like normal. She was livid and shaken. The next morning, Jenna went straight to the school. The principal admitted my mom had brought in old family photos to prove who she was and had casually dropped my name, saying I knew all about it. Apparently, that was enough to convince them she was acting with permission. Jenna realized it wasn't just meddling anymore. This was an intentional step into her parenting, one that could have spiraled into something much worse. She told them in writing that her mother was not to pick up her daughter under any circumstances. Then Jenna called Mom. She didn't yell, at least not at first. She told her flat out to stay away from the school, from her daughter, from anything that wasn't explicitly her business. Mom's response? She accused Jenna of turning into me and claimed I'd poisoned her against the family. Just like that, the golden child image cracked. For the next week, I heard from cousins that Mom was furious, telling anyone who would listen that I had turned Jenna against her just like I'd turned Melissa against the family. But this time, the story didn't land the way it used to. People had seen my mom's behavior themselves now. The sympathy she'd counted on wasn't there. A couple of relatives even called her out in public comments online. Then one night, Jenna called me. You were right, she said. She doesn't help, she controls. And I'm done. She told me she was moving 2 towns over to get her daughter into a better school district and to put physical distance between them and my parents. She wanted a clean break and needed help making it happen. Melissa and I didn't hesitate. We borrowed a moving truck, packed Jenna's apartment in a single weekend, and kept it quiet until she was settled in her new place. No Facebook posts, no group texts, no forwarding address for my mom. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, nothing from my parents. No calls, no surprise visits, no holiday cards. Just the occasional bitter, cryptic Facebook post about betrayal, but even those are quieter now, smaller. The family is split for good. My kids are thriving without the constant tension. My niece is happier in her new school, already making friends. And Jenna, she's figuring out what life feels like when help doesn't come with strings attached. The last line was crossed without warning. And in the end, the unexpected twist wasn't my mom pulling some final elaborate stunt. It was the one person I thought might always defend her finally walking away, too. And that, more than anything, closed the book on this for good. I keep the kids' Easter basket drawings on our refrigerator now. Every time I see that rainbow with our family underneath it, all of us together, smiling, I remember that some gifts are too precious to let others diminish. My children learned something important that Easter, even if they were too young to understand it fully at the time. Their love and effort have value, regardless of how others choose to receive them. They also learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who consistently choose cruelty over kindness, manipulation over genuine care. We make our own family traditions now. Our own Easter brunches, our own holiday celebrations. The table is smaller, but it's filled with people who know how to appreciate a handmade gift from the heart. And that makes all the difference.